This discussion merely strengthens the possible issue raised in the major discussion. First, we will see the possibility of judicial review. In Malaysia, we practice constitutional sovereignty. As the circumstances of this, Article 4 sub 1 of the Constitution sets out, Constitution is supreme in Malaysia, and any law passed after Merdeka Day incompatible with Malaysia Constitution will be declared as void. In addition, we found a journal article in order to help us describing the position of Constitution in Malaysia, especially Part 2 of it. Part 2 of the Constitution sets out the fundamental right entitled by a human in Malaysia. In this journal, they focus in mentioning Part 2, all rights, any provision in the Constitution. It means Part 2 of the Constitution is the strongest provision in Malaysia. Also, we have a case mentioned in the journal article, Law Kui versus Government of Malaysia. It sets out the Part 2 of the Constitution were made unavoidable by legislation. Also, if the government or the relevant minister have the power to impose the below act by using the relevant section, in taking necessary step, which is delegating the power to the employers to make vaccination mandatory act for their employees, we can see there will be a possible breach of Article 5 sub 1 of the Constitution. As the result of this, those working in the local infected area employees will lose the right of choosing whether to get vaccination or not. And this will lead to a possible judicial review action. A similar example discussed just now by Ms. Gan and Ms. Arisha will be the case of Wan Seman, and this case discuss the position, although the decision is not final yet, but it discussed the possible of seeking judicial review in Malaysia regarding making vaccination a mandatory act.
However, in the UK, the position of primary legislation is the same as the Constitution, where the Parliament has the rights to amend or repeal any constitution based on the journal article mentioned by my colleague just now. The Department of Health and Social Care in England has made a statutory instrument regarding mandatory vaccination for home care providers. The position of this delegated legislation is definitely lower than an Act of Parliament. It can be challenged under judicial review against the Human Rights Act 1988. However, we can see that the standard of reasonableness, so it is also very unlikely to have judicial review action. Another issue we can discuss in supporting the discussion by Ms. Arisha and Ms. Gan would be if the employer set out a mandatory vaccination policy and decides to dismiss employees who refuses to take vaccination. According to Section 20, Subsection 1 of the Malaysia Industrial Relations Act, if you were dismissed without just cause or excuse, your dismissal is unfair. In this case, we will have to consider the nature of the industry. If it is a high-risk industry in which workers have to contact with many people, especially the vulnerable group, then the dismissal of the employees who refuses to take vaccination might be considered as fair and reasonable, because it might jeopardize the health of other employees. For the employees who face unfair dismissal, they can first go to the negotiation stage, and if that fails, they can bring their claim to the industrial court.